Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to build a witch farm in Minecraft Bedrock Edition. Now, despite its simplicity, it is actually the most efficient design because, well, mostly all witch farms are the same and there's nothing really too complicated about them due to the way how the spawning of structures in Minecraft Bedrock Edition works. Now, for this farm, you actually don't need any spawn proofing, or rather, you need very minimal spawn proofing. And just like any witch farm, this will produce the standard drops like redstone dust, gunpowder, glowstone dust, and for this particular design, even health potions. And well, this produces about the same as any other witch farm on Minecraft Bedrock Edition, so you will get about 1.7 to 1.9 thousand items per hour, which means you will pretty much be getting 3 stacks of gunpowder and 3 stacks of redstone dust per hour, and other stuff as well, but those are the most important ones. Most of you are going to want to build it first and then learn later how it works, so I'm first going to show you how to build it, which means the full tutorial, and afterwards I am going to show you the mechanics of this farm. So if you are interested in mechanics, there is a time code in the description, or well, videos are now in sections on YouTube, so you can skip to the mechanics section and everything will be explained there. But now let's go check out the materials needed and then the tutorial. Now, the materials are actually quite simple, and the most expensive things you're going to have is a sword that is enchanted with looting 3. That is actually optional, you don't need looting 3 on your sword, and of course you don't need a netherite sword, it can also be a wooden sword, and a trident. A trident can be hard to get, but if you go hunting for long enough in an ocean, you will surely find a trident sooner or later. And it can be low durability as well, of course, because what we use in this witch farm is a trident killer, and tridents do not lose durability when they deal damage when they are in a trident killer. Now, the rest is fairly standard. Those are just any given solid blocks. It can be any other type of solid block, so it can be cobblestone or dirt or anything like that. And then just one piece of glass, and well, it can also be stained glass. Now, this scaffolding is there because it's practical, but you can replace that with any other method of vertical movement, for example, ladders. And the rest is fairly standard redstone stuff. Now, you are also going to need some glass panes for setting up the witch farm spawn spots. I forgot to put it in the chest, but you're also going to want to add one pumpkin because we're going to need it to determine the cardinal directions. So go ahead and take a screenshot if you need to, and yeah, those are pretty much the materials. Alright, let's build a witch farm. Now, I just created a brand new world just to show you that you can build this in pretty much any world, because there's no reason that you couldn't. And well, we are first going to need a witch hut. Now, how do we find a witch hut? If you already have a witch hut, that's great, you can skip up ahead, but if you don't, we are going to check out this next step. If you are in single player or you are the administrator of the server world or the realm world, then you can go simply into the pause menu and then go into settings and game and scroll down a little and you will see your world seed right there. Now, if you have your world seed, that already makes it much easier to find a witch hut because there's a website called Chunkbase, and with that website we can input the seed and then look for locations that include a witch hut. And if you do not have access to the world seed, well, then you're just going to have to run around a little and well, maybe you will eventually find a witch hut. Alright, we are now on the Chunkbase website, and the link to this website is in the description, so if you want to head there, just look in the description. And once we are on the site, we want to go into the apps tab, and then when you scroll down, you will find the witch hut finder. And then there's this witch hut finder. Now, what you want to do is input the seed of your world, so I've copied it. If we put it in here, we will have the map showing up something. However, because we are building this for Bedrock Edition, you want to select Bedrock Edition right here. It says 1.14 and above, we are in 1.16.100, but that is just fine. Just click that and you will see some purple dots. Now, every single one of those purple dots is a witch hut. You can simply just zoom in, and when you hover with your mouse over the dot, it will show the coordinates in the bottom left corner of the map. And if you are on mobile, you can also simply find those, and it is pretty much the same, just use touch for navigation. But yes, you can see those coordinates down in the bottom left corner, and it says X 576, Z 793. So we can head there. We can round it down to about X 600 and Z 800. So I am in creative mode, of course, so I can just simply teleport to the location. But if you are in survival mode, you are going to want to go there using the coordinates tab that you see in the top left corner. If you do not have coordinates enabled, then, well, I suppose you're out of luck as well, but we have coordinates enabled and we're in creative mode, so we could fairly easily find our witch hut, and there it is right there. That is pretty good. So this is going to be our location to build our witch farm. Now that we have our location, you're going to want to approach this carefully. Of course, you're going to want to kill the witch. And well, when you have her killed, then you can go inside and you can simply light up the inside. Now we just want that to light up for the simple reason that we don't want witches to spawn while we are working on the thing. What we simply have to do now is tear down the top of this witch hut. So you want to keep it at the same level as the floor of the inside, and then simply just remove the roof and the walls and all of that. With that being gone, we can place a temporary block right there, or anywhere really, and then you want to place glass panes all over where the blocks are. And the reason for that is that mobs in the Bedrock Edition spawn in the northwest corner of a block. So they actually spawn in between 4 blocks instead of on the center of a block. And furthermore, the witches, or rather in any structure, mobs spawn on one specific block per chunk. And witch huts are always inside of one chunk, so witch huts are always going to have a single block on which witches can spawn. That was hard to say, but you get the idea. So what we want to do is find that specific block where the witches spawn. Now you're going to want to remove the torch, because of course that would prevent the witch from spawning, and then put that back. And well, now we are either going to wait for nighttime, which would probably be your most convenient option, or you could build a roof over this, but I would not recommend it, so let's best just wait for nighttime. But before you wait for nighttime, you are going to want to make sure that you are at least 24 blocks away from this platform. Make it 30 at best. You could stand on the tree over there, for example, and that would be far enough away. Alright, it's nighttime now, and what we want to do now is just wait for the witch to spawn. As you can see, it spawns there, and what we can do now is head over there and then find out the spawn location. I set the time today so that you can see better what's going on, and as you can see, a creeper spawned as well, and that is simply because, of course, any mob can really spawn there, and a creeper, we don't really need him, so we can just finish him off. However, we want to keep that witch there for the time being. Because the glass panes are at head height, it's not going to attack you very much, but you can remove those glass panes, except the 4 glass panes in between which the witch is stuck. Now that we have our witch in between our 4 glass panes, you're going to want to place down a pumpkin, it doesn't matter in which direction, and the top is going to be useful because we're going to determine the cardinal directions. Now you see this little stem right there, it will always point towards the northwest of the world. So this is north and this is west. Now we need this because, like I said before, mobs will always spawn in the northwest corner of a block. So they spawn in between 4 blocks, like this witch did, and that means because this witch spawned there, it spawned in the northwest corner of a block, it means that this block right here is the spawn spot. Now we want to remove this, and you can replace it with any block, just make sure that you can keep in mind which one it is, and that will be our spawn spot. Now that we have that marked out, we can simply kill the witch, we don't need it anymore for right now. And then we can remove our glass panes, and we don't need any glass panes anymore, as well as that pumpkin can go away. For this next step, which is the very little spawn proofing that we actually need for this witch farm, we are going to need to determine our chunk borders. And to find our chunk borders, there are several methods. In fact, I made an entire video guide detailing on how to find chunk boundaries. And if you're not sure how to find chunk boundaries, that guide is in the description. But for now, I am going to use a chunk border visualizer resource pack. Now this will work on mobile and on Windows 10. It will not work on consoles. But yeah, that is what I'm going to use right now. And of course, all the other methods also work just fine for finding the chunk boundaries. Now what we simply want to do is flatten out and clear the entire 16x16 area in which the witch hut is located. And that is needed because we need to spawn proof this very single chunk in order to guarantee that the witches on that spot spawn at maximum speed. Because the single witch spawn spot actually depends on the chunk having spawnable spaces in order for itself to spawn witches, and that is what we're going to do now. So with my chunk border visualizer resource pack, I can easily see the chunk boundaries, and those are simply lines that are on top of the blocks. So I am going to mark out the chunk, and we want to do that at sea level. And then we just simply fill out the entire thing. Now for us, it is going to be partially on land, which is also pretty good. But chances are that because witch huts generate in water, yours will be entirely covered in water, and then you just need to make a floating 16x16 platform of solid blocks on top of the water. Now this needs to be solid blocks, so like I said, it can be any type of solid block. So it can be cobblestone, stone, dirt, anything like that. Just needs to be normal solid blocks. Then what we can do is remove the remains of this witch hut except for the block that we marked out before, and just remove all of that. Now that that is out of the way, we can finish filling out this platform. Now I have also removed any tree that was in the proximity because those we don't want either. And what we're going to do now is simply light up the chunk a little, so the 16x16 area, and it doesn't really matter how you do it, just use torches, and you don't want to use slabs because those will be problematic, simply just use torches. So we actually do still need our pumpkin, we're just going to place it down somewhere around here, and as you can see, we can still see where the northwest corner is. As for this spawn spot, it will not always be in the same height. So depending on how your witch hut generated, it may be one block higher or maybe one block lower. Or I don't think it can be one block lower, but it could definitely be higher. So that doesn't really matter much. As long as you have your block here, that's fine. Now you want to place another temporary block and then one piece of glass on top. Like I said, can be stained glass, and then just remove that temporary block. Just remove those torches around here because we're going to need some space for this next step. And because we have our spawn spot so close to the ground, we are going to have to dig a little into our platform. Now if you have water under your platform, you might need to do some water clearing, and if not, then you are fine. So you're simply going to want to keep in mind your northwest direction, and then you want to dig out blocks accordingly so that the spawn spot is the southwest of the 4 center blocks. In other words, the square you dig out will be facing northwest. Now the only space you need to dig out below the spawn space is to make sure that there are at least 2 blocks of clearance in between the spawn spot and the floor. Now because this may be water, we're just going to replace this with solid blocks, but after that we are going to install our trident killer. So now we are building our trident killer, and if you don't know what a trident killer is, a trident killer is simply an AFK and pretty easy way to get experience, and you don't have to use an auto clicker, and you can also use the looting enchant. Don't throw in your trident yet already actually, because we first want to install our collection. Now the collection is very simple. The way we build it is just some hoppers and a chest, but you can of course expand it any way you want to. You can install item filters and all that kind of stuff, or you can just add more chests. We don't need to put the chest on any specific direction, we can just put it anywhere we want to. We are just going to do it on this side because we have room there. So what you want to do is dig 3 blocks away from a space where there isn't a piston, so like this, 3 blocks, and then down here 4 blocks, and we're going to place our double chest, and then just 2 hoppers like this. We can place our stall block back, and that is pretty simple. At that point we can actually already throw in our trident. Now, what you need to know about this trident, or trident killers in general, is that tridents are always linked to the person who threw it last. So when the person who threw the trident is not online, then it will not drop any experience, and you will not gain any looting. So if you want to get experience and looting, well, experience is less important with this design, but the looting effect mostly, you will have to throw the trident yourself for usage of this farm. Let's just quickly finish building this trident killer. Now you want to get your observers and redstone dust, and just place an observer facing like this in front of every piston, and do that on every one of those pistons. Then put a solid block in front of every one of those observers on every side, and then just in the corners place some redstone dust. Now what this will do is that it will loop around the trident in a circle. So what we just want to do is close this in more and more, just like this, and then just get yourself a lever, and on one of the corner blocks just place it and toggle it. This will turn off the trident killer, and well, mobs will not take damage, because mobs will only take damage when they fall into the trident killer, and then the trident gets pushed by the piston. That's how trident killers work, and trident will not lose any durability in doing so. Now my trident killer is sunken into the ground because our spawn spot was a little lower than for some other wood shots, but if your trident killer is above ground, you should put blocks in front of the pistons, because pistons actually let light pass, and we want our little chamber to be dark, otherwise the witches won't spawn on daytime, or if there are torches nearby. So just put blocks in front of the pistons like this. Every other side of the piston should be obscured normally, so yeah, that is pretty much what you need to do for the pistons. Now just get here on top again, and you just want to close this thing in entirely. So just get it up to the height of the glass, then put another layer on top, and then close it off, and just put a torch on top so that no mobs spawn in there. If we did everything correctly, then the chamber should be completely dark on the inside. You can check this simply by going inside. I wouldn't personally, because you will pick up the trident and it will be dark, but I'm creative mode and I can fly, so when I close it up, as you can see, it is pretty dark. There will still be some light passing through, because hoppers also let light pass, and it's a little more complicated for us to isolate light from the hopper, because, well, the chest is also transparent, but the light level will be dark enough for witches to spawn, so that is not really a big issue. Even if we have a torch like right here, it should be dark enough for witches to spawn. So let's get out of here, let's close this back up. And that is actually the main part of our farm already done. Now what we need to do is get the AFK spot set up, and that is a little more complicated. Now for this next step, you will have to check your game version. If your game version is 1.16.100, you can follow this video guide exactly. And if it is not, make sure to check the description and the pinned comment on this video, because Mojang really likes to change things regarding to mob spawning, and if anything changes, I will keep you updated to how these things will work. However, in the current version, there are 2 spawning ranges, and that depends on the simulation range of your world. So for this next step, you're going to have to find out the simulation range of your world. If you are in single player, you can do the exact same thing that you did when you looked up your seed, and that is just to go into the settings menu and to go into game. Then you can scroll down and look at simulation distance. Simulation is a little slider that you see over here, and for us it says 6 chunks. Now when the slider is on 4 chunks, then it will be different. Now for simulation distance of 6, 8, 10 and 12, it will all be the same process, but for the simulation distance of 4, there is a slightly different process, because the spawning range on simulation distance of 4 is smaller than it is on 6, 8, 10 and 12, so yeah, let's get into that. Also worth mentioning is that if you are playing on a realm, then the simulation range will always be set to 4. This may change in the future, so make sure to check the description and the pinned comment for this as well. If you are in a server, not a realm, and you are not the administrator of the world and you don't happen to know the simulation range, usually the simulation range is set to 4, so you can follow the step for 4, but I would of course recommend asking your server administrator which simulation range your world is, because this next step widely differs depending on if you're on simulation range of 4 or 6, 8, 10 or 12. So first you're going to want to get some ladders. Actually any method of climbing this little tower works, so you could use stairs or leaves or anything you want. So what we're doing now is actually setting up our AFK spot. Now this is vital that you need to follow this exactly, because this is the only reason why we don't need any spawn proofing for this. Otherwise we would actually need quite a bit of spawn proofing, but with this AFK spot location you will not need any spawn proofing, except for this little platform that we just made. So as of 1.16.100, which is the current version that this video is being recorded in, the spawn range for mobs on simulation range of 4, that means realms included, is 24 to 44 blocks. So what we want to do is that we want this entire area to be within those 44 blocks, because any mob that gets outside of those 44 blocks instantly despawns. Of course we don't want it to be exactly 44 blocks above the bottom of the Trident Killer, because that would be too prone to irregularities, so we are of course going to keep it to an approximate amount. So for the simulation range of 6 or higher, that means 8, 10 or 12, the spawn radius is 24 to 128. Now that is limited horizontally, but that doesn't matter because we are going up vertically. So that means that in that case we want to go up about 120 blocks, whereas with simulation range of 4 we want to go up about 40 blocks. So from the floor of the Trident Killer to the top right here is about 6 blocks, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And to account for that, we can simply go up 34 blocks from the roof, and then we'll set up our AFK spot. Now just simply do that above the spawn spot and go up 34 blocks. And that is of course if you are at simulation range of 4. Now if you have coordinates enabled, you will see that the third value should be around 100. Now this may differ for you of course, because like I said, the spawn location, or rather the spawn spot below, can be a few blocks lower or higher than in this video, but in general it should be around 102 or 104. So that is for the simulation range of 4. Now for the simulation range of 6 and higher, you want to go up about 118 blocks. Alright, we are now far above the clouds for the simulation range of 6 or higher, and well, that looks pretty nice. And what we want to do now is simply set up our little AFK spot. Now you don't really need to use scaffolding, that goes without saying. You can use ladders and solid blocks to get up here. All that matters is that you get up here and get yourself a little safe space. This is pretty much the same for simulation range of 4. You want to just build yourself a little roof, because when you build a roof of solid blocks, there will be no phantom spawning from you not sleeping. Then just simply put a torch on top of that little roof. That will prevent mobs from spawning on top of it. And whenever you want to use the witch farm, you just stand right here. Alright, you're almost done with your witch farm. Now what you want to do is that you want to turn on this Trident Killer. We can already hear a witch inside of there. And you want your sword to be enchanted with looting 3. Now like I said, that is optional, but looting boosts the amount of items you get by around 2.7 times, so it will be very good to have looting 3. When your sword is enchanted with looting 3, then you are pretty much ready. You're just going to turn this on. Make sure that it is you who threw the trident, otherwise you will not be gaining anything from holding a looting sword. By the way, you need to be holding your looting sword in your main hand while the Trident Killer is on, for the Trident Killer to receive the looting effect. Then you just turn the Trident Killer on, and you simply climb up your AFK spot, the spot that we chose, and when you are up there, then you can simply set up camp and wait for all your witches to spawn and die, and you will have a ton of loot waiting for you when you get back down. Alright, for a fully functional witch farm, this is actually not a lot of work, and that is pretty much the entire thing done. Now what you might want to do is add some more chests. I'm going to get myself a chest and a hopper, or rather multiple chests and multiple hoppers, and of course you will have stuff in here, and especially because this farm produces health potions, you will need some more storage. If you are already a little more experienced at Minecraft, you can of course just build a larger storage. You can add item filters, you can add non-stackable item separators, all that fancy stuff, but if you are rather a casual player, then you can just add more chests like that, and then regularly pick the stuff up that ends up in here. Now it goes without saying that this might be flooded with water, so you might want to clear some water if there is water for you. For example, right there, there's some water, we can just close it off because we're lucky and our witch hut generated right next to land. But it might not be the case for you, so yeah, just definitely clear out some water and you can have your storage right there. Alright, the farm is fully functional now, and that is the tutorial section done. There's a world download for this exact world in the description, and you can check out the farm for yourself from there. Do note that I built this for a simulation range of 6 and higher, so it will not work if you turn on the simulation range to 4, because the witch hut, or rather the spawn spot, will just be out of range. But anyways, it's time to explain the mechanics now. Now before I explain any mechanics, I will give some credits for the people that helped a lot in making this design possible, and of course this is not something entirely new. I just made a tutorial now on this because it got a lot easier with the new spawning range in 1.16.100. Now I want to thank Guy, which is a former TechRock member, and he helped a lot on defining structure mechanics, and of course a witch hut is a structure. Then there are also Old Guy and Dr. Jan Sein, and those two are exploit members, and those two have also helped a lot in structure mechanics. In fact, Old Guy, a good friend of mine, also has a video on structure mechanics, and I will link that in the description. Then I also want to thank Nob/DotingHook77, which is a TechRock member, and who is actually being credited for finding the glass trick. And that is actually a credit that is being very underused. I don't see it a lot, and I myself keep forgetting about it as well, but it is actually a very important discovery, and it is what we call Instapush. This is this right here, but it doesn't actually push them up, it just offsets the spawning location. But, well, that is something very important, so Nob Doting Hook, that's very awesome. Now for this next one, I'm not really thanking anyone, but I just want to point out that I was pretty much the first to come up with these 4-piston trident killer designs, and that was right after the 1.13 update, because in the 1.13 update they introduced a change to tridents, that the tridents would get moved whenever they dealt damage to a mob. And that was previously not the case, we could just push them back and forth, but now we need to keep them centered. So that was something that I came up with. I know it's not a genius solution, but I just want to point out that I was indeed the one that came up with it. And even though something like that may seem simple, it still was a lot of research involved and a lot of work, so yeah. Alright, let's get into the first part of the explanation, and that is simply the structure mechanics. Now, as you may know, a witch hut is a structure, and structures in Minecraft Bedrock Edition have a mob spawning that is slightly different to the normal mob spawning that you would see from other mobs, such as, for example, sheep or cows or other hostile mobs, and let me explain. So in Minecraft Bedrock Edition, structure spawns actually work quite differently than in Java Edition. In Java Edition, structures can spawn mobs on pretty much any given block, but in the Bedrock Edition, they only spawn mobs on one block. This is what is known as a hard-coded spawning spot, or HSS for short, and there is one HSS per chunk per structure, and these spawn spots are always inside what's called an HSA, or a hard-coded spawning area. Now, simply said, a structure will have one spawn spot per chunk. With witch huts, it just so happens that they will always generate inside a single chunk, so unfortunately you cannot get a witch hut structure crossing a border and generating a second hard-coded spawning spot, so we are limited to one hard-coded spawning spot per witch hut. Now, unlike the general mob spawning algorithm, which obeys to a random 11 in 2000 chance per chunk to spawn a mob, or rather to execute a spawn attempt, they actually depend on the normal mob spawning algorithm, but they don't actually completely work the same. So what is important for a hard-coded spawning area and its hard-coded spawning spot to spawn mobs at full speed is that the chunk in which it is located has available spaces for spawning mobs. Now, ideally, you want to cover as many spaces as possible and make them available for spawning mobs. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that mobs need to spawn for this to work. This setup right here that we have in the tutorial will also work because we have solid blocks and we have light preventing the mobs from spawning. But if the lights were not there, or rather the torches, then mobs would spawn very much so and it would be no problem at all. However, if we had slabs on top of these solid blocks, then it would block the spawn attempts, and in turn the spawn spot or the hard-coded spawning spot would not produce as many witches or not produce witches at all, which is of course not what we want. So it is important for a hard-coded spawning spot to perform at its best that all of the spawn spaces in a single chunk are available. And of course it goes without saying that all of those blocks should be solid blocks. So right here I have quartz blocks, but also dirt and cobble and all that works. Just like the natural spawning, mobs that spawn from the hard-coded spawn spots obey to the same spawn and despawn rules as normal mobs. So that means for simulation range of 4, mobs will spawn between 24 and 44 blocks, and further than 44 blocks they will instantly despawn. And from 32 to 44 blocks there's a random chance for mobs to despawn. Whereas on simulation range of 6 and higher, which you have on this world right now, mobs will spawn from a 24 to 128 radius. It is limited horizontally, but that doesn't matter for this farm right here. And they will despawn instantly starting further than 128 blocks from the player. Just like on simulation range of 4, there is also a random despawn that occurs from 32 to 128 blocks, and it is a random chance to despawn mobs. And well, that is also pretty good because it pretty much takes care of any possible irregularities. So for example, potentially some of those dirt blocks could be in range when you are standing up there, and there would be potentially a drowned spawning, and that one would eventually despawn. Now what's also important to know is that the natural spawning algorithm has 2 types of spawns, and those 2 are surface spawns, so mobs that spawn with mostly sky access that can be obstructed by some types of blocks, or it can be cave spawns. Cave spawns are simply spawns that occur below a solid block, and well, those 2 types of spawns have different caps. So those cave mobs have cave cap, and those surface mobs belong to the surface cap. Structure spawns will always be part of the cave cap, but that doesn't mean that they need the same conditions as cave mobs spawning. So you could have an open roof, so you could have nothing at all above the hard-coded spawn spot, and the witches would still spawn, and it would still be the cave cap. Because structure spawns, including these witches, are a cave cap, that means that any mobs that will be spawning here on the surface will not affect this witch farm. And that means that only mobs that spawn underground would actually affect this witch farm. Now this will be hardly an issue for this witch farm at all, because well, we placed our AFK spot high enough that there should be no caves in range for actual cave mobs to spawn. Small side note about the surface and cave spawns: there are some mobs that are exclusive to the surface spawns, and some mobs that are exclusive to the cave spawns, and then there are just some mobs that are in both. So for example, a creeper is in both surface and cave spawns, but they have a different cap for the cave and the surface. And let's say a drone, for example, that will be spawning here will only spawn on the surface and hence also only fill up the surface cap. Now something else to note is that witch huts will never generate closer than 7 chunks in between the chunks in which they are located. So let's say we want a witch hut right there. Unfortunately that is not possible because there is another witch hut that is closer than 7 chunks. That is very relevant information for multi-witch hut forms, which are technically possible because if you are on simulation distance of 6 or higher, you can technically fit 2 witch huts inside a single simulation range, or rather a single spawning range. But well, if you are on simulation range of 4, you will not be able to find such multi-witch hut locations. However, witch huts spawning with only 7 chunks in between is extremely rare. The closest I've ever seen witch huts spawn is with 9 chunks in between them, and that unfortunately doesn't fit in simulation range of 6 anymore. It would fit in a simulation range of 8, but not even 6 unfortunately. And well, you would most likely need a specific seed to find multi-witch huts, or well, you would need to go out really far. So I'm talking 20,000 blocks or something, maybe even 100,000 blocks. The closest one I found was around 20,000 blocks out, and that one didn't even work like I said, because it was 9 chunks in between those. Even if you do manage to find a seed where there are multiple witch huts close to each other, it is very likely that you will not be able to spawn witches from all of them at the same time. Now one last thing to say is that a completely destroyed structure will of course still spawn mobs like normal. So we remove the entire witch hut, but it will still spawn witches. That is because the arrangement of blocks or the structure itself doesn't actually have any meaning. The only thing the game knows is the hard-coded spawning area and the hard-coded spawning spots. And those are impossible to remove unless you go into world editing. And well, that is pretty good because you can do all sorts of things with structures and make pretty cool farms. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to check the description for all sorts of credits, and also check the pinned comment for any sort of info regarding this farm, because things change a lot and they really like to change spawning recently. So yeah, definitely do check that, and I will keep you updated of course if anything changes and include fixes. But anyways, that was about it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and well, you know what, I put a ton of effort into this video, so maybe you should subscribe. Well, that's all up to you, but I think it's very much worth it. But anyways, enough about that, and I will see you around. Bye!